And now we have a really impressive time that we are going to spend with some outstanding speakers. First of all, one of the conferences is going to be entitled A Walk Around the Domènech Montaner Barcelona, offered by Lluís Domènech i Girbau. He's an architect and president of the Lluís Domènech Montaner Foundation, and he's also a grandson of Lluís Domènech Montaner, the architect. And he is going to be flanked by Claudia San Martín Martínez. She's also an architect. She's a member of the School of Architectures and the ADIPA Guild of Architects. And this year she is the co-curator, the curator of the Domènech Montaner Year 2023. So they are two very renowned experts on the work of Domènech Montaner, and they will help us learn and enjoy this architect who was born and died in Barcelona, being 100% Barcelonian. Thank you. Good afternoon. We will start by saying that presenting the work of Domènech Montaner in the time we've been given for this conference is just impossible. So we will give you a rough idea of what he did in Barcelona, and we will invite you to visit all these different artworks. We will talk a little bit about the family environment. We tend to talk about the architect, but let's talk about the person as well. Let's also understand that he was not only an architect, he was many more things too. He was a politician, he was a man of culture, and he had a very close relationship with the School of Architects. And we will also talk about his most well-known facet, which is his facet as an architect, especially in Barcelona. Let's talk about the family background. He was always related to the world of arts. He's the son of Pedro Domènech, who was a binder. He did bookbinding. So since he was a very young boy, he was in contact with the Barcelona cultural elite and with graphic arts. Pere Domènech Saló was initially a farmer from Sant Just. And when we had a revolution in Barcelona, he became a printer. And here we have some examples of what he was doing in his publishing house. He moved from being a farmer to a luxury binding printer, and they would bind and print collector books. These are some examples of Verdaguer. These are some examples of his links to the world of culture. We try to avoid comparisons between Lluís Domènech Montaner and other architects, but who didn't marry and didn't have any children. But Lluís Domènech Montaner did marry with Maria Roura. He married shortly after he got his degree, and he had 8 children. The first children were girls, Maria Asunción and Ana Maria. In 1881, his son Pere Domènech Roura was born, and we will see that he became an architect as well, and he ended up collaborating with his father, and he also contributed to generating this architecture in Barcelona. This is the man, and then he had Dolors, another son who died when he was very young, Lluís, Felix, and Enric, who also died later. So we need to try and understand how could he, with this huge family, with all the different things that he did and all the works of architecture that he was able to build. He also had political activities. He was closely linked to the Catalan nationalist movement, to the Renaixença movement, that's closely linked to his presentations, and this is linked to the Bases de Manresa, the Catalan political constitution. It was closely linked to it was a draft for a regional Catalan constitution. He presided this assembly, and he was also a member of parliament in Madrid in 1901 for the first term, and he was re-elected later, but he was fully disappointed, and he talks about that, and this would be too long. He had some ideological problems regarding his last political party, the Lliga Regionalista, and he was, well, he had a clash with Mr. Cambó, and he had to, well, he broke off with them because of Alphonse, the king, Alphonse the 13th, and well, they had a fallout between those who were in the same political party. And I don't know if that rings a bell to you. And we will not go into details, but he was also a historian, he was a scholar, he published on history, he was also in the academy, the Fine Arts Academy of St. Jordi. There's going to be an homage paid to him tomorrow. He was also the president of the Ateneu Barcelonès. There is going to be an event tomorrow to discuss the periods, the terms where he was president. He was also closely linked to the Floral Games poetry contest, and he was also a scholar of heraldics, and that's something that we will see very often in his work. And we will also talk about his role as a teacher. He taught at the School of Architects, and here we see some of the examples of work done with his students. He started very young in 1875 when the School of Architects was founded here in Barcelona, and he spent 20 years as a teacher first, and then as a professor, and finally as the director of the School of Architects. Domènech, if you're interested in the website of the Domènech and Montaner Memorial Year, you will have lots of information about that and about his works in Barcelona and across Catalonia. So if you have an interest on that, you can discuss, you can look into the website. Let's talk about his role as an architect. The Hospital of St. Pau's Hospital. Let me give you an idea. This is more or less the timeline. This is 1973. That's when he was born, and he died in 1923. Well, the St. Pau Hospital was not concluded when he died, and then the Palau de la Música. These are two pieces of work that we will not present because we wouldn't have time. So if you've never been there, we would like to invite you to visit them because these are amazing spaces with guided visits. And the Music Palace, maybe it's better to go there to a concert. And I really invite you to have a look at them and visit and pay them a visit because they're really worthwhile. And now we will talk about the Domènech's Barcelona. To give you a rough idea of what Barcelona was, this is a 1750 map. This is the city walls. This would be the Ramblas. And when Domènech was born, Barcelona was also within the city walls, locked in the city walls, and there were different municipalities around: Gràcia, Sarrià, Sant Andreu, Sant Martí, Sants, Horta. All these different villages started to grow, and when Domènech started to work, we already had the extension plan. This is a picture, a map from 1890, and he combined the different positions. It's not that he started working only on the old part of town, but on different areas, for instance, of the extension of the city. And this is the current view of Barcelona. So based on this, now we will discuss Domènech's Barcelona and the buildings that still exist, plus some of the buildings that were never built or that have already existed. We will just give you a few hints because we wouldn't have time to go into the details for all of them. Let's talk about the first commission he received. It's Casa Maria Montaner. Well, Maria Montaner is his mother. The first commissions are by family members. Well, for family circumstances, Domènech's father died when he was very young. He died of a heart attack very suddenly, and the mother, who was a widower, decided to carry out real estate activities, and Domènech Montaner was her architect. If you can see, I don't know if you see the image, this is in the border between the old part of town and the new part of town. She bought a plot of land and she built a block of flats for rent. It was a way to have regular income. Usually this buildings tend to be simple because, well, owners want to invest as little money as possible to get as high a profit as possible. But they tend to be simple buildings. But in this case, it's not so because they have some decorative elements and graffito as well as corbels, and then it also has some courtyards with that allow light to come in and so on, and look at the railings, for instance. Actually, the family lived there when they left the old part of town. They came here to live, and Domènech started working in this house. And it's funny to see that he went to visit the work of the University of Barcelona, which was built by Elia Rogent. The second big commission was in 1877. Himself plus Vilaseca, his partner, who built the Arc of Triumph. He graduated in 1873, and 4 years later he won a very important contest in Barcelona. It should have been placed here, but it was never built. These were the provincial institutions. This was a huge educational complex that would have included different universities and work schools and so on. It is worthwhile to mention that this was an extremely good idea, the idea of creating the first polytechnic school in Barcelona at that time. That was the time of the Industrial Revolution, and it was very timely to do something for invention, architecture, engineering, and so on. And here in this complex, 7 different schools, including the School of Fine Arts, were going to be pulled together. It was never built because when the contest was published, the land increased the prices so much that the provincial council decided to invest the money elsewhere, in the maternal hospital that you see on top of the diagonal avenue. For you to get an idea of the size of this building, this would be the plant of Maria Montaner. If we were to place that building at the same scale, it wouldn't fit in the screen. So if we make this building a little bit smaller, this is the block of apartments. This is what this other building would have been. It would be a mega block of buildings. They spent 3 years traveling around Barcelona. The final plans have not been kept, but this would have been a fantastic building, and everything that was never built became part of the culture of experts, technicians, and this was also published in several magazines and journals and became part and parcel of the imaginary of the city. This was a failed contest, but he continued to work in the publishing house and got some small commissions. And for instance, he was asked to do a factory in an area that would have been then part of the Eixample and would have been to be demolished. And then he also got another commission by the partner of his uncle. It's been destroyed. And there's also a request for a building permission in the lower part of the Liceu. He wanted to reform the bakery, the pastry shop that was there. But this was never done, and the plans have been lost. Uh, Domènech was not a vedette. He was not a diva. He was just a normal, a run-of-the-mill architect. So he was in charge of important commissions and also in charge of minor commissions. He always understood that as if a commission was very important, he would go for it and he would exceed the customer's expectations. But he was also able to go there to the plots of lands and to do sketches and to call the master building and to also do these minor commissions. One of the first things that you will probably know is the foundation, the publishing house Montaner y Simon. This is the current Tapias Foundation. This was commissioned by a family member, the one who had built a tower in Lesseps, and he built this building, which is still preserved. And it's funny because this building was the first one that was really done by Domènech, and it generated lots of expectations and lots of different thoughts, among other things. Can you move to the previous one? The initial facade of the building has nothing to do with the one that was eventually built and that you're all familiar with, because it was supposed to be in stone and it had a neoclassical finishing. This has to be, we need to thank his teachers in Madrid, where he learned about the use of bricks as noble materials, brickwork. So he ended up building this publishing house in exposed brickwork, and he invented this symbolic world, this one. This symbolic world that we see in the finishing, where we see the coats of arms and sculptures, coats of arms which are invented with these cockworks, these cockwheels, imagining the industry that is going to be located in that place. We would like to invite you to visit that fabulous building that you could visit here in Barcelona. And let's move quickly to another apartment building. This is not a family commission, so he cannot spend so much money. And we will finish with Fuste Fabra House. This is a small block of apartments. Nobody would say that this is by Domènech Montaner. It is true. It's very simple. It is true that it has some graffiti work. And in the back, I don't know if you can see that. This is the rear facade, but here we see some drawings and some small graffiti that remind us of Domènech Montaner. Probably he got a little bit more money to be able to put these ornaments that he would have liked. This is another small, a small building. Font y Torres is close to the Palau de la Música. It's a very simple one. It doesn't look like Domènech Montaner. Look at these very simple railings, a few ornamental elements in the cast pillars, but these are houses in Barcelona by Domènech, but they don't look like Domènech. And his boom, the turning point arrived with the 1888 Barcelona World Fair. He had several commissions. One is the International Hotel. This is already disappeared. The cafe at the Ciutadella Park, and I don't know if you know, but it's Saló de Cent in the Barcelona City Hall. He was commissioned to refurbish it as a royal residency. The International Hotel was built in a couple of months, 2.5 months actually, 2.5 months, and it was built with a huge ability to organize work, to host all of those who would come to Barcelona, because there were no quality hotels, and 1 year after the World Fair finished, it was demolished. To give you an idea of the size of the building, this is again his mother's house. This would be used as a reference, and to give you the same scale, we will have to make it smaller, and the building would have had this size and this plan, with 1,000 bedrooms, plus the ground floor. That was a huge space with courtyards and light wells, and it had all other modern inventions. They had the telegraph, shops, and so on. These are electric lights. They they created one of, well, they installed these lights so that they could work in the night shift as well, because they were so much in a rush. It was prepared to be demolished. It was an ephemeral construction. Sorry, we cannot hear the gentleman.
Totes les exposicions tenien pavellons nacionals o d'entitats i quan s'acabava l'exposició, en principi, s'enderrocaven sempre. El que passa que quan l'edifici anava agafant valor...
These World Fair buildings were expected to be demolished unless only when they had a huge value they were preserved, such as the Eiffel Tower. This is the entrance of light. This was an amazing building, but it was demolished, unfortunately. It was in the Moll de la Fusta, by the seaside. We will see that on the map. Currently, it's an empty place. And then we also have the coffee shop and restaurant. It became the museum for zoology. It was baptized as the Three Dragons building. It was refurbished, it was named after Pitarra book. This was the most important theoretical work by the architect. Ignasi Solà Morales, a historian who's actually here with his wife today, said that in one go he had solved structural, functional, and decorational issues. And you can see that very clearly because we had a very big space for the restaurant. This mixed structure with brick and iron. The quickest way to build at that time was to ask the bricklayers to work, because they were able to elevate the walls very quickly. And then the iron main beams were built outside in a different workshop, and then we have all these decorative elements that they are almost like a joke here, but they are an irony in the construction. The International Hotel would have been here. It disappeared. Another an apartment building. He starts to be a little bit more famous, even if he doesn't look like. This is something that we are submitting for the first time. It's the first time we're showing images from the inside of the house. The University of Barcelona is studying this Rabassa house. It was supposed to be an apartment building for rent. It's bigger than expected because Domènech actually more or less joined two buildings together. It's very simple. These are the plans, some stone buildings, and his big innovations, and this is what we are presenting for the first time, was the light well. He built this huge light well or courtyard, and everything was decorated with paintings. When Domènech starts to be able to spend some money from his customers is the Montaner Palace. It will be visitable. Here we have the representative of this building, which can be visited from now. And it's a funny story because actually this has become the Spanish government delegation in Barcelona. This project was started by Domènech Estapà, who was not a member of this family, and actually they didn't like each other. They were actually stealing projects from each other, so they were not in good terms. When Domènech Estapà started building this, the customer, who is an uncle of Domènech, tells Domènech El Malo, they said, okay, I'm going to change architect. And they have these pictures where you can see how on the photograph of the house that was already in place, he started to design all the decoration, all the decors. And I think that during the Modernist Fair, this can be visited. It's amazing, such a building. The building is amazing with this skylight and the imperial staircase. Another building is a commission by his mother. Again, this is a way of investing the money to be able to create more income. This is in Balmes Street. We are moving away from the old part of time, and this is the way it looks. As the mother is the one who pays, look at the difference between the finishings when it is a family member who is willing to put some more money into it. Right now, I don't know if you've been there, it's at the end of Balmes Street. It is in a very bad condition, but it's a fantastic house with this graffito in the facade. We don't have pictures from the of the inside, but it has lots of light, well, big light wells that bring a lot of light to the inside. The owner, actually, the ownership, the owner is Maria Montaner.
Maria Montaner.
This is another first. This is something that is being researched by a group of researchers. Sometimes we see things that we're not very sure if this is to be allocated or attributed to this architect or not. And now we know about this Casa Campmany. This house has just been refurbished. It's amazing from the outside. And what do we know about it? It's one of his uncles, and Ricardo Campmany was a decorator, and he was living in the noble floor. The house was refurbished, and Domènech only signed this, a small studio for his nephew to be able to paint on the top floor. But if we look at the paintings in the facade, and here we have a little detail, they are very similar to what we showed before of that light well that was profusely painted. So he asked for a building permit for one thing, but then they did other things. That's very common. So he participated in the painting of this facade and also the inside of the house. We see the stoves and the ceilings. We're still studying if this can be attributed to Domènech Montaner. We will see some more light. We will shed more light on this in the conference organized soon, the Coupe de Fouet conference. Domènech had amazing collaborators throughout his lifetime, artists, industrialists. They had such quality in their work that if they had not existed, I'm sure that Domènech as architecture would have never been what it actually was. So let's continue. We also have the Thomas House. There's a big concentration. Well, it's almost by chance, but Thomas House, the one we know, is currently like this. This is the floor plan. But what Domènech did was just the ground floor for Josep Thomas, who was an engraver. He did engravings, and soon later, another in-law, who was an architect, built 2 or 3 additional floors, and he did that in agreement with Domènech, and he transferred part of the decorative elements to the top floors, as we can see that, and he continued with all the different ceramic elements that were already there. This is what Domènech did at the time, and here we see all the ceramic tiles and the decorations of that house. Again, this is a turning point. We've seen earlier, look at the timeline, this is 1902, he's already a politician, he has already started building the Sant Pau hospital, and he is coming to the zenith of his popularity. He has a different type of clients, and his clients want to show off. And here we have the La Madrid house, which is currently in renovation. Maybe next year you will be able to visit it or to see it. And here we see these elements. For instance, the plan, the ground plan is similar to his mother's. This is a customer who wants to spend money on the facade, but he wants to get profit from this. And for his mother, he had just one apartment per floor, and here he built 2 apartments per floor with good lighting and so on. Even if these plans seem simple, in the end, the artists he collaborated with created a spectacular architecture. This skin decorating the building is just amazing with this fine stonework. It's totally different from the simple railings that we saw for the balconies in the earlier houses. In one of the photographs, this will be here. This is the Lleó Morera house in Passeig de Gràcia with this top tower crowning the building. It is not something that he built from scratch. This was already a very simple apartment building, but he was commissioned to refurbish it, and he changed he decorated the openings and he refurbished the facade, but the inside is just amazing. It's not only the inside, all the stained glass windows and the ceilings and the flooring and so on. About this stained glass window with the chickens and so on, this was a prototype of a domestic house, and there was the living room and the offices and so on, and the back was for the ladies and the children, and that's why they were confined to this very domestic space, and the lady here simply devoted her time to bearing children. Let me share an anecdote. All the facade has sculptures by Xavier Arnau, and it has been recorded that in the ground floor there was a photographer. Originally, it had muses there, and at some point there was a refurbishment in the 1940 by Duran y Reynals, a famous architect, and he eliminated all of this. And we don't know exactly how, but the faces of these characters can be seen if you go to the Dali Museum in Figueras. And if you walk around the gardens in Dali Museum, you will see these busts that are a little bit run down because they are out in the open. But these were decorating the facade. We don't have much time to explain this, but in the same period, because we've been moving along Domènech Montaner's life, there's also a refurbishment of a hotel called Fonda España. The restaurant is amazing. Here we see the columns of the Augustus Temple in Barcelona. He did a whole reform to make them visible, and probably in the Domènech year we will manage to do something. It's interesting to look at the Fonda España. It has plenty of pieces, and in the living room, in the restaurant, that's where people who were very respectable and classical used to go there. But there's this surrealist point. You're talking about a dining room, but it looks as if you were in the middle of the sea, surrounded by this world of mermaids and fish. Ramon Casas was the painter who did the drawings for these mosaics. And very quickly, let me conclude with the last huge urban building in Barcelona. It's called Fuster Fabra. It's the Fuster Hotel, but the one signing the maps and paying for this was Consol Fabra. They are the ones who paid for the Fabra Astronomical Observatory, among many other things. It's a very rich family. We're always using the same scale, but this is something totally different in this house. They were supposed to be living in the first floor, and this was a house that they built for themselves. Consol Fabra and many others. This floor plan is another wonder for by Domènech Montaner. If you look at this, the facade is where you see these very thick pillars that go round. In the back, we have another street called Jesus. It's very narrow. It's a very narrow alley, but most of the house was this mid-partition wall. This was the end of the Passeig de Gràcia street. It's called Jardinets de Gràcia, and that's where the Major de Gràcia street would start. Domènech did a trick here.
Domènech fa un truco
Actually,
que
the
és
house
que
next door,
quan,
as Claudia said, was
de fet,
owned
la
by
casa del costat,
Domènech,
com ha
and so he
explicat la
took the
Clàudia, ja era de Domènech,
uh,
agafa
the
l'alineació d'aquesta
line of
casa,
the
que
house,
és
and he
l'alineació
invented, which
del
was the
Xampau,
line
i
of
s'inventa,
the
ell s'inventa, perquè
Passeig
el
de
solar
Gràcia. So he
era molt
invented
més gran i no
something
estava definit,
different. This
s'inventa una
turn
alineació que és
that
aquesta
brings
corba,
together, that
que així
joins the width
l'amplada
of
del
Passeig
Passeig
de
de
Gràcia
Gràcia
with the
amb
width of
l'amplada
the
del
Major de Gràcia
carrer Major
Street,
de Gràcia.
because they are different. And this is the culmination of, well, this is what you see at the end of the Jardinets de Gràcia. It was supposed to be bigger. If you look at the plan, this doesn't exist any longer because this, it wasn't very clear. I guess that he ran out of the budget, as happened very often in many of the works at the time. And in the end, he asked, well, he sent the plans back to the city council because part of the building permit had to be repaid to him. This is the ground floor. It's a coffee. It's a cafeteria. I recommend you to go there for a coffee and visit it if you may. And let me say something else. It's funny to see the evolution of Domènech i Montaner. The facades change shape. And the style in the facades also changed. From the first one that was very strong in brickwork, the first houses that were built, it becomes softer, smoother, and we see these decorated chapels, and this is inspired in Venice. You see this very pale stone is very similar to the limestone used in Venice, and the windows are like inside the wall as in Venice. This is the ground plan. These were some apartments for rent, most of them 230, 250 square meters. Another one would be here. The purpose is for all of them to have a facade to either Passeig de Gràcia or Gran de Gràcia. Look at this one. This would be another apartment, and this is the shape of the final apartment. These were the apartments that were for rent, but the apartments for the owners were the ground floor, sorry, the first floor. Over 1,100 square meters. In the back, they had bathrooms and bedrooms, and the most representational part was the front. This noble floor, owned by Ms. Fabra and Mr. Fuster, they could go in with their horses' carriages all the way into the house here in the Passeig de Gràcia, and they could go out through the other floor. That's why the whole of the hotel, it's transparent. You can see from Passeig de Gràcia, it would go all the way. They would take the main staircase, and they would walk up to the first floor, which was the residence. At the same time, he also had some small commissions. Many of them are not well known. We don't know if some of them are family obligations or because he had to give work to some of his workers in the office. They also have small houses in Guinardó, Pobla Sec. They don't look Domènech i Montaner, and this is almost a summary of the houses that we've explained today. For you to get an idea of the scale, this is the Casa Fuster Hotel, which is his final apartment building in Barcelona, and the rest, so that you can get an idea of the comparison. But we wanted to finish with this plan of Barcelona to say that this is not only the works that we have here, because if we look at what we said at the beginning, Domènech was also a teacher at the School of Architecture. He started in 1875, 2 years after graduation, and until 1900 he was teaching different directors, and after that he was the director of the School of Architects. So all architects had to go through his hands, and in his obituary lots of love was shown for him, for his relevance and importance. Let's have a look at some of the projects of some of his students. This was Enric Catà, who became one of his collaborators. I don't know if you realize this, but it looks very much like the Sant Pau Hospital, or this one, by Pere Domènech Roura, his son, and he drinks from the sources of his projects. And this is another one, Antoni Darder, another of his former students, and these ones by Amadeu Llopart and Joaquim Vilavecchia. So many years teaching at the School of Architects. He's been training many of the architects who built Barcelona, so it's not only his own buildings by Domènech and Montaner, and also those buildings built by his disciples and his students. And with this, we would like to conclude the talk. Thank you very much.